All rise. The Kosovo Specialist Chambers is now in session.
Be seated. Madam Court Officer, please call the case.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. This is case KSC BC 2020-06, the Specialist Prosecutor versus Hashim Thaçi, Kadri Veseli, Recep Salimi, and Jakub Krsnić.
Thank you. First of all, I note that the accused are all present in court today. We will start hearing the evidence of Thaçi witness 1DW-008. Before we start hearing the evidence of the witness, there's a preliminary matter that the panel would like to address. The panel notes in filing F0359, the Thaçi defense requested, first of all, an expedited briefing schedule for the filing, and second, leave to amend its exhibit list to add one item that it intends to use with IDW-008. The SPO responded that it does not object to the request. First, the panel notes that the expedited briefing schedule for the request on Friday First, the panel notes that it expedited the briefing schedule for the request on February 7th, November 2025. Second, in respect of the Thaçi defense, request to add a video of the press conference by IDW-008 and its corresponding transcript to the exhibit list. The panel notes that 1, the video was disclosed on 16 October 2025, and 2, the Thaçi defense was only able to assess the full evidentiary need of the video in the preparation session it held with IDW-008 on the evening of 5 November 2025. The panel recalls that the relevance and importance of certain items may become apparent to a party as a trial proceeds. In addition, the panel notes that the Thaçi defense made the request 2 days after it realized the importance of the item. The panel therefore finds that the Thaçi defense has provided timely notice. The panel observes that the document relates to the witness's interactions with the KLA and his observations on the level of organization and command and control of the KLA in 1998. These are topics relevant to the charges in the indictment. The panel therefore finds that the material is prima facie relevant and of sufficient importance, and that there is good cause for its late addition to the exhibit list. Lastly, regarding prejudice, the panel observes that the request is limited in scope, as the Thaçi defense only intends to use 1 minute of the video. The panel further notes that the SPO does not object to the addition to the exhibit list. Given that the parties and participants will have sufficient time to adequately review the video and prepare for IDW-008's testimony, the panel finds that no prejudice will arise from adding the video and its transcript to the exhibit list. The panel therefore grants the request to add 129503-12 and 129503-12 TR-ET, as well as any corresponding translation to the Thaçi exhibit list. The panel orders the Thaçi defense to file a revised exhibit list as soon as possible, but by no later than Friday 14th of November 2025. And this concludes the panel's oral order. Before we bring the witness in, the panel reminds everyone that in F03532, the panel authorized certain measures under Rule 107 for the present witness, including that, 1, the the witness's testimony be limited to certain topics listed and authorized in paragraphs 35 and 38 through 39 of the same decision. 2, the scope of the cross-examination be limited to the scope of direct examination and issues of credibility. 3, the witness may decline to answer questions on the grounds of confidentiality. And 4, representatives of the Rule 107 provider will be present in court during the witness's testimony. The panel will not entertain questions that cannot be shown to be clearly linked to matters authorized by Rule 107 provider and relevant to the case. Where queried on the point, the questioning party should be ready to state how certain lines of questioning fall within the scope of the Rule 107 authorization. Madam Usher, please bring the witness in.
Mr. President,
Oh, yes.
just one procedural matter. Now that the video has been authorized to be added to the exhibit list, may we amend our queue to add it to our queue?
Yes.
Thank you.
You can put the headphones in and I'll be here.
Morning.
Turned on. Good morning.
Good morning.
The court usher will now provide you with the text of the solemn declaration which you are asked to take pursuant to Rule 141, Paragraph 2 of the rules. Take a look at it and then read it aloud.
Okay. Conscious of the significance of my testimony and my legal responsibility, I solemnly declare that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that I shall not withhold anything which has come to my knowledge.
Thank you, witness. You can be seated now. Regarding introductions, the parties and participants may have noticed that we have a representative of the United States government who is joining us this morning in connection with the witness's testimony. If you could please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. It's a pleasure to be back with you. Tara Gerhardt-Serna, the Deputy Legal Counselor at the United States Embassy in The Hague.
Thank you. And as I believe you knew, we authorized you to have your laptop. That isn't for transmitting material outside of court, but for your own notes. And I know you've done this before, so you recognize that. Witness, today we will start your testimony. It is expected to last approximately 2.5 days. As you may know, the Thaçi defense will ask you questions first, and then the remaining defense teams will ask you questions. Once they are finished, the SPO has the right to ask questions of you, and members of the panel may ask questions of you. The Thaçi defense estimate for your direct examination is 3 to 4 hours. The remaining defense teams will take approximately 3 hours. The SPO estimates that it will need 4.5 hours. As regards each estimate, we hope that counsel will be judicious in their use of time. The panel may allow redirect examinations if conditions for it are met. Witness, please try to answer the questions clearly and with short sentences. If you don't understand a question, feel free to ask counsel to repeat the question or tell them you don't understand and they will clarify. Also, please try to indicate the basis of your knowledge of facts and circumstances that you will be asked about. Please also speak into the microphone and wait 5 seconds before answering a question, and then speak at a slow pace for the interpreters to catch up. Even though we're speaking to each other in English, you're going to be translated into 2 more languages in addition, so they have to catch up with our talking too fast. During the next days while you're giving evidence in the court, you are not allowed to discuss with anyone the content of your testimony outside of the courtroom. If a person asks you questions outside the court about your testimony, please let us know. Please stop talking if I ask you to do so, and also stop talking if you see me raise my hand. These indications mean that I need to give you an instruction. If you feel the need to take a break at any point or wish to repeat anything, please make an indication and an accommodation will be made. Finally, I note that you are accompanied in the courtroom today by one representative of the U.S. government. In this regard, the panel has made a prior ruling that your testimony will be limited in scope, and the representative is in court today to help us with that. Please, if you have any doubt about the scope of your testimony, you may ask the panel or the representative. We begin now with the examination by the Thaçi defense. They're seated to your right. Mr. Misitich is standing. You'll recognize where he is now. Please give him your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Ambassador Hill. At the outset, could you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Christopher Robert Hill.
And what is your date of birth?
8/10/52, that is August 10th, 1952.
And what is your nationality?
I'm a U.S. citizen.
And is it correct that you are a retired United States diplomat?
That is correct.
And your title at the time of your retirement is ambassador?
Correct.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? What degrees have you achieved?
Sure. I majored in economics in college and graduated from Bowdoin College. I also received a master's from the Naval War College some years later while I was in the State Department. Do you want me to discuss my career in the State Department? Okay.
I think I've already started to speak too fast, so I will take a pause for a second.
Yeah.
We will get to your diplomatic career in
Okay.
a moment. I just wanted to ask you a question about your master's degree at the Naval War College. Could you tell us what the degree was in?
National Security Studies.
Okay. And did your master's degree provide you any familiarity with military structures and organizations?
Yes, it did.
When did you start your diplomatic career?
I started my diplomatic career. I entered the Foreign Service in October 1977.
And can you tell us what your postings were in your diplomatic career prior to 1998?
Prior to 1998, I entered the service in October 77. My first assignment was in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, in summer of 1978. I was there until the summer of 1980. I returned to the State Department in 1980, and I was a watch officer in the State Department and then a member of the policy planning staff until I went to Warsaw, Poland in 1983. I departed Warsaw in 1985 and went to Seoul, Korea in 1985 until 1988. At that time, I returned to the States. I worked for a congressman on a fellowship within the framework of the State Department from 1988 to 89. And in 1989, I became the desk officer for Poland. And in 1991, my next assignment was I went to Albania, Tirana, Albania, where I opened the American Embassy, which had been closed since 1946. I departed Tirana, Albania in 1994, and at that time became the director for the Balkans office in the State Department, culminating in my participation in the Dayton peace talks, which was in October until November 1995. After that, I went to Republic of North Macedonia in the summer of 1996. And in 1998, while I was still in the Republic of North Macedonia, I became the special envoy for the Kosovo-Serbian issues and completed those assignments in the summer of 1999.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, in your postings in Tirana and North Macedonia, did you have any opportunity to either travel to Kosovo or to become familiar with the issues in Kosovo?
Kosovo was a major issue within the Balkans, but at that time, not the number one issue, which of course was the wars that had gotten underway, including in Bosnia and between Serbia and Croatia. Nonetheless, while in Albania, during those 2 years in Albania, I learned a lot about the Kosovo situation. I did not actually visit Kosovo until May of 1998, when I was asked to take it on as an additional responsibility to my responsibilities as the U.S. ambassador to Skopje.
Thank you. Did you return to the United States in 1999? And if so, what positions did you hold in 1999 and 2000?
I returned to the United States in 1999, summer of 1999, and in September of 1999, I became the senior director at the National Security Council staff, senior director for Southeastern European affairs, namely the Balkans. I did that, I performed those duties until the summer of 2000, at which point I went to Warsaw, Poland as the U.S. ambassador.
Okay. As part of your duties on the National Security Council staff, was Kosovo part of your portfolio?
Yes, it was.
What languages do you speak?
Well, it's a function of what point in time, but I've spoken Polish at a conversational, better than a conversational level, Serbian, and I can speak some Albanian.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned that you were involved in the Dayton peace talks. Did you work with Ambassador Richard Holbrooke at that time?
Every day.
And was Kosovo an issue at the time of the Dayton talks?
The Dayton talks were very much focused on ending the war in Bosnia. However, the issue of Kosovo had come up in some circumstances where there were American citizens of Kosovo background who wanted us very much to take on the issue of Kosovo, but the focus continued to be on the crisis in Bosnia, and that was what the Dayton Peace Accords were about. We, of course, did have conversations about Kosovo. I had some direct conversations with President Milosevic in the context of the Dayton Peace Accords because we knew that Kosovo would be the next crisis.
You just mentioned President Milosevic. At the time, meaning around the Dayton Accords and prior, had you had an opportunity to meet with the relevant officials or persons in the Balkans?
With respect to Kosovo?
Kosovo, Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia.
Well, during the Dayton Peace Accords, of course, we had the president of Croatia, the president of Serbia, we had the senior officials, including the president of Bosnia. So I spoke with those people on a daily basis. There were no representatives there from Kosovo or Albania. But prior to starting the Dayton peace talks, I did go and visit Macedonia in the context of trying to address some of the issues that Macedonia had. I did not have an occasion to engage with Kosovo leadership. I will say, though, that going back to in 1989, I did have the occasion to meet Mr. Rugova at the American ambassador's residence, that is Ambassador Zimmerman's residence. So that was my first conversation with Ibrahim Rugova. And so I met him subsequently in 1998, in May 1998.
Okay. And just finishing up on your background, you've mentioned that you became you were posted to Poland in 2000. Following your posting in Poland, what were your remaining postings in your career?
Okay. After Poland, I left Poland in 2004. And at that point, I went to Korea and as ambassador. I had been there earlier, as I mentioned, from 1985 to 88. So I went back to Korea in 2004, immediately after Poland. However, the Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, asked me to conclude my assignment in Korea and become the Assistant Secretary for Asia and Pacific, which I started in the spring of 2005. At that time, they also asked me to take on the responsibility of heading the U.S. delegation to the North Korean talks, which I did for some 4 years, from 2005 until 2009. In 2009, the incoming administration, President Obama, they asked me to go to Baghdad and become the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, which I did in 2009. And I retired from the Foreign Service in 2010, went into academia, and then went back into the Foreign Service in 2022 as the U.S. ambassador to Serbia. I stayed in that position until January of this year, 2025.
Thank you. In these experiences in your diplomatic career, would you regularly meet with heads of state?
Oh, yes, I did,
Would you meet with government ministers?
all the time.
Would you meet with military officials?
Yes, many,
Would you meet with foreign intelligence officials?
of course, yes.
Non-state actors? Would you meet with non-state actors?
You mean such as business people and people like that, people who are not in in foreign governments? Yes, I would.
Yes. As a diplomat, was it your job to assess the roles and authorities of persons with whom you interacted?
All the time. That was my main job, to understand situations, to listen carefully, to understand power relationships, whether within the government and or outside of a government, and to try to help formulate U.S. policy based on this knowledge.
And you mentioned you were in academia. Can you tell us what posts you've held in academia?
In academia, I became dean of the International School at the University of Denver. Then I did that for some 8 years, at which point I was an advisor to the chancellor at the University of Denver. After that, I went and taught at Columbia University for a semester, and after that, I rejoined the Foreign Service as ambassador to Serbia.
And do you hold any posts in academia today?
Yes, I'm a professor of practice at Fletcher School of International Law at Tufts University.
Thank you.
If I could just say, Fletcher School's International Diplomacy and International Law.
Thank you. Turning to your first engagement on the issue of Kosovo, when were you first engaged by the United States government in trying to resolve tensions in Kosovo?
That I was first engaged by the U.S. government in May 1998.
And who asked you to get involved in that issue?
I had a telephone call from then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and she asked me if, in addition to my duties as U.S. Ambassador to Macedonia, that I would take on the position as Special Envoy to Kosovo.
And as Special Envoy to Kosovo, to whom did you report?
I reported to, as Special Envoy to Kosovo, I reported to Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. I should add, however, that by this time, Holbrooke, former Assistant Secretary Holbrooke, was very much interested in the issue and frequently advised me on issues, and I kept him informed.
Did you have an understanding that Secretary Albright was relying on your assessments as the Special Envoy?
She relied on a lot of my assessments, but I think she also got information from other people as well.
What was your mandate as the Special Envoy for Kosovo?
Early on, it was understood that we should support a political, some kind of political solution, and to try to step away from the growing potential and the growing potential of violence. So early on, I began to try to put together with colleagues in the State Department an autonomy plan that would restore Kosovo's autonomy and give Kosovo its self-governance. So that was the idea to pursue with Kosovo and with Serbia.
Why was it important to try to achieve a political solution?
Well, I think it is always preferable to achieve a political solution rather than some other approach. But it was especially important here because our European partners and allies, a number of them were concerned about the outbreak of violence again on their continent and very much wanted to see a political solution achieved. And so for that reason, we worked very closely with the Europeans as we had in the lead up to the Dayton Peace Accords as well.
And in working with your European allies, was there something known as the contact group? And if so, could you explain what it was?
Yeah, excuse me, I'm trying to wait this 5 seconds, but I can see I'm not doing a good job of that. The contact group was a kind of coordinating mechanism which involved the interests of Russia, the United States, and the Europeans. And so it did not include all of the European states that had a particular interest in it. It included Germany, it included France, it included the UK, and later on began to include Italy because of Italy's great interest in the Balkans, which very close to Italy. So it also included a representative from Russia and of course the U.S. The contact group was at several levels. There was my level as a negotiator, but there were also the ministers would get together on the basis of being in the contact group and discuss the way forward on Kosovo.
Thank you. In terms of your preparing for your work as special envoy, did your daily routine include reading press reports from the region or about the region?
Yes, my daily routine included reading press reports and also coordinating with interested parties, which included, of course, a number of European states beyond just the contact group.
Did you read cables, U.S. diplomatic cables?
Yes, I read cables and I wrote some myself.
Do you recall from which posts the cables were written?
They were written from a number of different posts. You might have a cable written from a European country because the ambassador there had had a discussion and the issue of Kosovo had come up, and so the embassy and a given European post might send in a cable on it. Cables in were quite numerous, and to be diplomatic about it, some were more useful than others.
Okay. Did you read intelligence reports regularly?
As part of my duties, yes.
Was it raw intelligence or was it reviewed?
Well, I would say it was both.
Would you get briefings from embassy staff?
Yes.
And would that include the Belgrade embassy?
Yes, it did include the Belgrade embassy, but by the time I was there, the person on the ground was myself, and then of course we created actually this monitoring organization.
Would you receive information from other parts of the State Department and the National Security Council on the issue of Kosovo?
Yes, Kosovo was a primary issue. So if the secretary, for example, hosted a foreign minister from a European country, chances were very high that one of the first discussion points would be about Kosovo. So someone on the Secretary's staff would make sure that I knew that she had had a conversation with somebody about Kosovo. The Secretary, of course, is always prepared with a number of talking points. Some of those issues, they could range all over the waterfront of U.S.-European relations, for example. But in those days, Kosovo would likely be one of the issues. And at least with respect to Kosovo, people would make sure I knew what the Secretary had said or what she had heard from some foreign diplomat.
As part of your mandate to find a political solution, did you try to identify points of contact and authority on both the Serb side and the Kosovo side?
Yes, I did. It was very important to talk to various parties who were going to be either part of the solution or part of the problem. And so, yes, I did. I spent a lot of time trying to deal with people both from Kosovo and from Serbia.
And on the Serb side, who did you work with?
On the Serb side, I worked primarily with President Milosevic and his team. That included his former foreign minister, then prime minister at one point, Milutinovic. But basically on the Serb side, it was very limited, and it was mainly Milosevic.
And on the Kosovo-Albanian side, did you find anyone who could speak with authority on behalf of Kosovo Albanians?
That was a very challenging and at times vexing operation of trying to find people who could speak with authority. Everyone had an opinion about it. It was never a problem to find someone with an opinion. It was a problem to find someone with authority. One of the people was, of course, the head of the League of Democrats of Kosovo, the LDK, and that was Ibrahim Rugova. He had been at it he had had a leadership position in Kosovo, albeit informal leadership position, for well over a decade. As I mentioned to you, I first met him in 1989 at Ambassador Zimmerman's home, and he was already well established as a Kosovo leader. But unlike in Serbia, President Rugova was not the only person that one could talk to in Kosovo because he did not represent the range of views.
Can you describe the difference in 1998 between your engagement with the Serbian side and with the Kosovars in terms of organization, structure, line of authority, and decision-making?
Let me be sure I understand the question. You want to know lines of authority and decision-making within Serbia and lines of authority and decision-making within Kosovo or among the Kosovo Albanians?
Yes, and what the differences were, if any.
Well, in Serbia, I don't mean to be facetious and call it one-stop shopping, but one could get a lot of information and a lot of clarity in a conversation with President Milosevic. This situation was not mirrored in Kosovo. In Kosovo, these were discussions I had with President Rugova, but it was not sufficient to get a broad enough understanding of the Kosovo position. Nor was President, I call him President because Rugova had a title as head of the LDK, President of the LDK, but nor, if I talked to him, could I count on something being implemented, so we needed to go further.
Okay. You mentioned that Ambassador Holbrooke had an interest in this issue. Can you tell us what Ambassador Holbrooke's role was in this period?
I think it's fair to say Ambassador Holbrooke, having made a historic contribution to peace and security in the Balkans in Dayton, felt a certain frustration that Dayton was that there were continued serious problems in the Balkans, and that because he had been so focused on Bosnia at Dayton, which was the purpose of Dayton, he felt that he needed to somehow be engaged and help get Kosovo to a better, to a solution. And so he gave me a lot of advice on what to do in Kosovo, some of which I asked for, some of which I did not ask for. And he also gave advice to Secretary Albright, and I think the same goes for her. Some of the advice she wanted to get from him, and some she didn't. Ambassador Holbrooke was extremely active personage who had many opinions, and many of them were very valid opinions. And so one would pay attention to what he had to say.
Okay. Was there ever a time when the United States encouraged Mr. Rugova to meet with Mr. Milosevic, and if so, why?
Yes, this was the first time that Ambassador Holbrooke went to Pristina. I went with him, and we sat down with President Rugova, and while we hadn't really discussed this in advance, Ambassador Holbrooke thought it would be a good idea if Rugova met with Milosevic in Belgrade, because he hoped that this meeting could solve a lot of problems. I must say I was more skeptical.
Do you recall when this meeting between Mr. Rugova and Mr. Milosevic took place, and where?
This took place in Belgrade, at the presidency in Belgrade, and it took place at the end of May or in early June, and that's an empirical question that I should be able to give you a precise date for.
That would be May or June of '98?
98, yes. That was soon after I started my role as Special Envoy to Kosovo.
Do you know if Mr. Rugova's meeting with Mr. Milosevic had any impact on Mr. Rugova's standing in Kosovo-Albanian society?
I think it is fair to say this is a matter of analysis and opinion, which is what I can give you on this. I think it hurt him. It hurt Mr. Rugova, because I don't think there was a strong body of opinion in Kosovo to the effect that a meeting with Mr. Milosevic would help. And so I had reservations of whether it would help him, and I continue to have those reservations whether it did help him. And he also was very concerned about whether this was a good idea, but he didn't want to be in a position of, in his first meeting with Ambassador Holbrooke, he didn't want to be in a position of turning down his suggestion.
Was there any opposition to Mr. Rugova in Pristina itself?
I think it is fair to say that Mr. Rugova had been the kind of, he had been the informal leader of all of Kosovo, and I think the opposition to him was growing because there was a sense that he was not making any progress.
Do you know who may have been leading any opposition to him within Pristina?
I'm not in a real position to say who, but I can tell you that people that we often met with had great frustrations with Rugova and the LDK structures. Some of those people joined us at the Rambouillet conference the following year. So Mr. Rugova, I think, was having a difficult time projecting leadership and any sense of accomplishment in dealing with Serbia. And I want to stress the context of this was that somehow Bosnia had a way forward thanks to Dayton, and Kosovo was still stuck.
Did you have any opportunity to discuss with intellectuals such as Vetan Saroy and Recep Chosia what their views were of Mr. Rugova?
Yes, I did, and I think it's fair to say there was a lot of skepticism about his ability to accomplish to make any progress. The immediate issue for Kosovo was to try to create a separate republic. The Serbs did not agree to that because they saw a separate republic as leading to a secessionist agenda, just as separate republics in Western Yugoslavia had declared their independence.
In addition to the issues you've just testified about in terms of criticisms of his ability to lead Kosovo, were there any other issues that led to criticism of Rugova and the LDK?
Well, the LDK was a very well-organized political entity in Kosovo. It essentially funded an underground school, an educational organization, so kids did not have to go to Serbian school, but could go to a kind of underground Albanian school. For that, it needed funds, and it raised funds in Western Europe, where there's substantial ethnic Albanian communities. And I think there was, it's fair to say, there was a lot of criticism of whether all these funds were well spent.
Let's turn to your first contacts with the KLA. Do you know when anyone acting on behalf of the United States first made contact with the KLA?
Well, that should be a simple question to answer, but it is not. The big problem, of course, with the KLA was the inability to find leadership there and find people who could speak with authority. Robert Gelbart, who had held the position that I held until he was asked to focus entirely on Bosnia, that is in May 1998, he had some meetings with Kosovo Albanians in Switzerland and had heard that they were in charge of the KLA. I didn't believe that was true, and nor has there been any evidence to suggest that they were, and I'm sorry, I don't recall who they were, but I know that there was an effort by him and others to try to find who was running the KLA, and it was clear from those conversations that the people he talked to were extremely sympathetic to the KLA goals, that is, of a more rapid move toward independence, but it was not at all clear that they had anything to say about it any more than anyone else did.
You've mentioned Ambassador Gelbard. Did there come a point where Ambassador Gelbard had referred to the KLA as a terrorist organization?
Yes, and that was part of a sequence of events that brought the issues in Kosovo to a kind of crisis level. Ambassador Gelbart, as many Foreign Service officers do, drew heavily on past experiences. His past experiences had been in Latin America, where he dealt with narcotics trade and other issues involving organized crime. At one point, he made a statement to the effect that he has dealt with various organized criminals, and he used the term terrorists, and that he viewed the KLA as terrorists. it was a comment he made to the press, and it was soon followed by an incident in which Serbian security forces surrounded the home of the Yasheri family, with the consequence that everyone was killed in this. It was a major, major outbreak of hostilities. There was a lot of criticism that Gelbart's statement that the KLA were terrorists had somehow precipitated this particular incident on the part of the Serbian security forces, that they had felt that Gelbart had somehow signaled a green light for this. I parenthetically would add that I don't think there's any evidence for that, but this was certainly what was being discussed, that if the American envoy calls the KLA terrorists, then somehow it's a signal to the Serbs to move against them. Gelbart then took a very tough view on the Serbs for doing this, for engaging in this attack on these people, and it also included a very tough conversation with that Gelbart had with Milosevic, with the consequence that Milosevic said he would not see Gelbart anymore. So the whole issue in May was started by Gelbart speaking about his prior knowledge of criminals and terrorists from Latin America, culminating in this attack, if you will, on the Yasheri family. Gelbart then making a serious course correction, and Milosevic refusing to see Gelbart anymore. So it really took an issue that was serious and made it even more serious and more deadly.
Just as a background question, does the United States have a formal process for designating foreign terrorist organizations?
The U.S. does have a formal process of designating terrorist organizations, and to my recollection, that was not ever done with respect to the KLA.
Thank you. When did you first make contact with the KLA?
The issue for me in the summer of '98, working with my staff and with others, was to find a KLA official or group of officials who could really speak for the KLA. I might add that I worked on this for some time and without success, such that certainly our operating conclusion was that there was no such leadership, that this is very much groups of people at local levels, which was I think a much more accurate description of what we're dealing with. I did at one point go to I went to Tirana, Albania, to meet someone who had been described to us as the head of the KLA. My conclusion, the conclusion of my colleagues, was yes, he's certainly operating within that that movement, but no, he could not speak for the KLA. And then we continued to work on trying to find people who could really speak for it. And at one point going to town of Likov, and I would have to check precisely, but all this was in the summer and fall of '98 as we tried to find an interlocutor.
First, if we go step by step.
Yeah.
The first contact you mentioned in Tirana Do you recall the name of the individual you met with?
If you mentioned it, I would. Do you have a name?
I'll read to you the preparation
Okay,
note
yeah,
that we
yeah,
took.
I'm sorry,
It's paragraph 7, and ask if this refreshes your recollection.
yeah.
Ambassador Hill confirmed the information provided in this interview is correct, and his first contact with the KLA was actually in Tirana in June 1998 with Javed Haliti,
Correct.
a.k.a. Zeka.
That's correct, yes.
Now, did there ever come a time when you discussed with anyone from the KLA in Kosovo whether the KLA people in Switzerland had the authority to speak on their behalf?
I don't recall having discussions with the KLA in Kosovo about the group in Switzerland. I do recall having discussions with various Albanians in Kosovo, and the conclusion was, no, these people in Switzerland are not in charge of the KLA.
And you just testified about an encounter with the KLA in Likovsk. But prior to that, did there come a time when you and Ambassador Holbrooke encountered anyone from the KLA?
Yes, although the significance of it was greatly overstated at the time. We went out into an area that had been attacked by the Serbs, and our Kosovo friends wanted us to see this and talk to people there. It was a village. It was accessible on a main road, so we went out there, and the name of the village was Unik. And as we were talking to the various farmers about their very difficult experiences with facing Serbian security forces, a gentleman walked in with a very thick beard and camouflage uniform, and Holbrooke remarked to me and to many others that he had the appearance of Che Guevara. And he, I think it is fair to say, was also very media savvy, because we were all sitting on the floor talking to, drinking tea and talking to these Albanian farmers. And this gentleman came in, and there was not really room between next to Holbrooke, but somehow he made room, so he had the appearance of sitting on Holbrooke's lap. The picture was taken and went around the world, and it looked like Holbrooke had made contact with the KLA. We subsequently determined that he may have been a self-styled member of the KLA, but he was not a leader in any way, shape, or form.
Mr. President, I should have asked at the beginning what breaks you wanted to take. At 3:30? Okay.
Sorry, at 3:30.
Thank you.
So everyone knows it'll be a 15-minute break.
Thank you. Now, you've mentioned a meeting with the KLA in Likovsk.
Yeah.
Do you recall who was traveling with you to that meeting?
Yes. Femi, I think in this meeting we had a member of the LDK, Femi Agani. We had two other prominent Albanians who were journalists. One was Vetin Soroy, and the other was Blarim Shala. And I also had with me in the back seat of the large vehicle Tina Cadenow and Philip Rieker. The only thing I am not 100% sure of is whether Femi Agani was on that trip or a subsequent trip.
Can you tell us who Tina Kadenow and Phil Rieker were?
Tina Kadenow was my assistant and very knowledgeable about the Balkans. She was a junior Foreign Service officer at the time, and her second assignment was in Belgrade, and she was very effective, and so she was seconded to me. Philip Rieker was my press spokesman at the embassy in Skopje, who came with me on these trips to Kosovo, and later, like Tina, was together with me at Rambouillet.
Can you tell us why you went to Likovsk on that trip?
It was, to the best of my recollection, it was to try to get a better sense of who is running the KLA, and can we entice them into a political process.
I'd like to show you an excerpt from a book, but first let me ask you, do you recall giving a lengthy interview to Blerem Shala while you were ambassador to Poland in 2002?
I do recall giving a lengthy interview. I do not recall it being as lengthy as some of the what I read later on that he wrote. But
Okay. Well, let me show you one excerpt from that interview. Madam Court Officer, if we could please have DHT 12206 to DHT 12372 at page DHT 12274. Now, before we start to review this portion, can you tell us who Mehmet Hayrizi was?
I'm sorry, I cannot. I don't remember.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll show you this in case it refreshes your recollection. This is purporting to be you speaking to Blerem Shala. And, sorry. Yeah. It says towards the top middle part of the page, time is wasting. Do you see that?
So I went back to Hayrizi. This is the first person singular is me.
Yes. It says, if you look from the fifth line down or sixth line down, time is wasting.
Time is wasting. Meanwhile, many people are losing their homes.
Yes, if you
Yeah.
could just read that paragraph so I don't read it out loud.
Okay, time is wasting. Well, I must tell you, I do not recall him, except I do recall trying to put together a negotiating team and find people who were mutually acceptable among the Albanian factions.
Okay.
And I felt a certain sense of urgency because we had this draft autonomy paper, but we had not succeeded in negotiating elements of it because no one would engage on it until everyone was there, and you would not have a situation whereby engaging on it you were somehow not you were somehow out ahead of other people. So it was a constant frustration to find people who could speak for others.
Okay. Then going back to this trip to Likovsk, if we could scroll down to the bottom of the page, please. There is the fourth line from the bottom. So Mehmet, and then says, so Mehmet agreed that we would try something the next day. The next day, instead of going south, we went north, and then in a rather roundabout way to get over to the Drenica Valley to Likovsk.
That's correct. When we went south, we went through Stime, I think. And we encountered a firefight there. And in that trip, I remember Femi Agani said it's a Serb provocation. And since our vehicle took some rounds, some bullets it was an armored vehicle, fortunately. But I remember saying to Femi Agani, if it's a provocation, it's a very good one. So we're not going to continue on this trip. So we took another route to get to Stime. This was all based on the idea that we could get to people in Likov who could actually speak for a broader constituent.
Okay. If we continue on, it says, as we were, and it goes to the next page, as we were going, we were met by KLA escort and escorted over these dirt roads. We could see hundreds of families with their tractors and their trailers loaded with all the family's belongings as they were escaping the fighting. And I'll stop there for a second. Does that refresh your recollection that this meeting took place before or after the Serbian offensive that started in July of 1998?
I think this was after the Serbian offensive.
It continues, hundreds and hundreds that we saw of these people. We finally got to the KLA headquarters, where they seemed to be more interested in ceremony than in anything else. They had flags, they had an honor guard. Is that consistent with your recollection?
Indeed, it is.
It continues, we went into a room with a green-filled table. There were drinks lined up along the center of the table, just like some formal meeting that you might have in some NATO country, and these guys were wearing their uniforms.
Yes, green felt table
Green felt.
with bottles of mineral water.
Thank you.
There was a lot of desire to show this is a normal meeting with a military staff.
It continues, we sat down, and then I turned to Hairizi and I said, well, Mehmet, it's all yours, go ahead. Mehmet turned and said, well, I'd rather you conduct the meeting. And I thought to myself, well, I've driven all the way out here. If I'm going to do the meeting, I'll do the meeting.
Yeah.
Is that consistent with your recollection?
Yes, it is, and it's actually bringing back some recollection, because I remember, now I'm beginning to remember who Mehmet was, and he was supposed to be a little more active in this, and instead he turned to me, because nobody wanted to take any responsibility for saying something that would suggest they're prepared to engage on a document which did not achieve their objectives.
And you then continue, so I made the request to the KLA that we want to restructure the government and that we're going to have a new prime minister with Mehmet Hairizi here. But the real purpose of this whole thing is to get a negotiating process going, ceasefire, and the negotiating process.
Yes, because what was going on was the idea, earlier I referred to Rugova as president, and that was because there was an entire structure. The Serbs would have called it make-believe, but the Albanians, it was a government structure in their view. So the idea was to expand the government structure and have different groups participate as opposed to just the LDK. And I saw no harm in this, but I was more interested in people who would participate in a negotiation rather than people who would participate in a government structure which nobody recognized,
Okay.
or no foreign entity recognized.
Then it continues, so the KLA, the guy in charge, Recep Salimi, said, well, thank you very much, and we will convey this to the Chief of Staff. I said, that's terrific, but I thought you were the Chief of Staff. That's why I'm here. You know our vehicle took actually a bullet on the back of it, We went over some very dangerous terrain. We were exposed to a number of shootings. We had refugees going everywhere, and you're telling me you're not the person to make the decision. He said, no, I'm not. So needless to say, I was very disappointed. So I said, when can we get your decision? He said, maybe next week. I said, I am sorry, but next week is not an acceptable answer. We have to move much more quickly. Is that consistent with your recollection of that conversation with Recep Salimi?
Yes, very much. And it was very frustrating to me that we were told we could meet someone who had something to say about things. But again, nobody would take responsibility for really, for any real discussion. And it was quite an effort to get there. I did not have security people with me, and I can tell you the State Department security would have not been enthusiastic about this trip, given that it also included our vehicle taking some rounds, which we didn't even report to people, although we saw the marks on the back of the vehicle, so it did happen. So we took a lot of risk, both bureaucratic and personal risk, to get to a guy whose only answer was, we'll convey your message.
Okay.
You know, when you're in these circumstances, you're trying your best, and it's sometimes frustrating when you think other people are not trying their best, because it should be more important to them than to you.
Understood. You continue then in this interview. In the meantime, Mehmet Hayrizi pulled out a piece of paper in which the paper contained changes in the government and included a denunciation of Rugova or calling for his dismissal. Do you recall Mehmet Hayrizi denouncing Rugova in this meeting?
Again, I think there was a lot of frustration with the LDK's monopoly on the Kosovo-Albanian view, and that was reflected in this, I don't want to call it a so-called government because it meant a lot to people, but it was a government that people not in the LDK did not feel that it represented their views. So these people focused on expanding the government. I took expanding the Kosovo government more as a metaphor for getting people who can actually negotiate on the document. So I kind of played along with the idea that we're trying to make the government more inclusive, but the real issue was to get to use inclusivity to get a negotiating team that could represent all points of view.
Okay. And I'll conclude with this excerpt by reading the last paragraph. It says, "It was clear to me that Hayrizi was not able to deliver the KLA at that point, which was a big disappointment, because I had worked very hard to get him accepted as the Prime Minister. First, I thought he could deliver them. Then I thought he could deliver them after I met with the KLA, and both turned out to be wrong. I left that meeting pretty discouraged and convinced that we simply don't have the luxury of waiting around for these guys in their fatigues to go and find out who the General Staff is and whether they get permission. It was clear to me we didn't have interlocutors. At that point, I had to make a strategic decision. By that point, we were beginning to do some drafts."
Yeah.
Now, in this excerpt, you say that you left that meeting pretty discouraged and convinced that we simply don't have the luxury of waiting around for these guys in their fatigues to go and find out who the General Staff is and whether they get permission. Did you believe at this point that there really was such a thing as a General Staff in charge of the KLA?
No, I did not. And I think a lot of this effort to demonstrate that there was an army with its usual vertical lines of authority was really an effort to show us, just as people were showing us that there was a government there, was an effort to show that there are normal political and military structures, and that we could take them seriously. And yet, as this paragraph shows, we couldn't get anything from them. And I think there were exercises really in people trying to show that they were more important sometimes than they actually were. So this was discouraging, but I might add, which goes beyond your question, that I made my views known to a number of people on the issue that I'm not sure that we're looking for something that really exists.
Ambassador Hill, at this point, did you think the KLA was a vertically organized structure with a hierarchical organization?
No.
Mr. President, I would like to tender this excerpt from the Shala book, the cover page and the pages that I've shown to him. So it should be, the range, full range is DHT 12206 to DHT 12372, and we will tender DHT 12206 as the cover page, and then DHT 12274 to DHT 12275.
From the defense, any objection to that? The rest of the defense? SPO, any objection?
No.
From the range of DHT 12206 to DHT 12372, DHT 12206 is the cover page, and DHT 12274 to 12275 is the excerpt,
Yes.
and the cover page and the excerpt are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. The cover page and 2 pages will receive exhibit number 1D00423. Classification is public.
Thank you. Madam Court Officer, now I would like to show another excerpt from this book. DHT 12206 to DHT 12372 at page DHT 12292, please. And if we scroll down to, that's it, yes. Ambassador Hill, this is another excerpt from that interview, and you were asked by Mr. Shala, did you at that period know who was in charge of the KLA? Who was the most important person in the KLA? And your answer is recorded as, looking for the person in charge of the KLA was not something that you would succeed at. There were different groups of people. There was the Dukagini crowd, there were the Dranitsa people, there were various local commanders, there were key logistics people like Javed Haliti, there were finance people in the Western countries. So I don't think there was any one telephone number or satellite telephone number that we could have called. There were different people, and that's why there was such an effort to try to talk to these different people, even though in talking to them, we frequently confused them more than we enlightened them. So when we started thinking there was more than one policy, etc., and then it gave life to sort of Serb paranoia, that, gee, the U.S. is talking about reaching an agreement, the Hill Plan, etc., the real U.S. approach is to help the KLA with the military victory, etc., etc. All this sort of paranoia. Now, is that excerpt of your interview consistent with your assessments of the KLA at the time?
Yes, this excerpt is consistent with our assessments of the KLA, and it also reflected our continued frustration at not finding any leadership that we could engage.
Mr. Mistich, could I ask you to perhaps elicit some clarification as to what period that period is referring to in the question by Shala?
Yes. Ambassador Hill, you've heard the judge's question. Do you recall what period of time this is?
I think this would have been late summer, early fall '98.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I tender this page as well and ask that it be added to 1D00423. That's page DHT 12292.
Objection? SBO?
No.
DHT 12292 is admitted and will be attached to the previously admitted documents.
Your Honor, that page will be added to the exhibit number 1D00423, and it's classified as public as well.
Thank you. Madam Court Officer, if we could please have the video at 129503-12, beginning at the 37-minute and 26-second mark of the video, please. Ambassador Hill, I'm going to show you a video of a talk you gave at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. on the 4th of September, 1998, with John Lampe, and ask if the excerpt there is consistent with your recollection today of your assessment of the KLA.
Okay.
Can we make that a little bit bigger, please, Madam Court Officer? Thank you.
We were actually hoping to just show the video rather than the transcript. Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think there's any one person who would speak for the UCK anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's that easy to bring the UCK onto the table unless you have a big table. I think the best way to deal with it is to show that the process can succeed, show that the process is moving forward, and as people gain a sense of optimism from the process, they will want to be a part of it and will understand that it is going to lead to better lives. It will improve it has a better chance of improving their lives than the continuation of armed struggle.
Ambassador Hill, is what you said on that event consistent with what your assessment was of the UCK at the time?
Yes, very much, in the sense that we hoped it would become a more inclusive process, but that would only happen when people felt that it was moving in the right direction. So, yes.
And can you tell us, when you say you can't bring the UCK to the table unless you have a very big table, what did you mean by that?
Meaning that you would have all kinds of different opinions, and therefore no one single person at a small table could speak for everybody. You would have to have a lot of people at a table.
Okay, thank you. Mr. President, I tender that excerpt from the video into evidence.
Any objection, SBO?
No.
129503212, beginning at 37.26. What was the end point?
3741. Oh, sorry. I can't even see it. 3809, please.
The 3809 is the end point that is admitted. Please give it a number.
Thank you, Your Honor. A portion of the video at 3726 to 3809 will receive exhibit number 1D00424, and classification is confidential.
It can be public.
Reclassify it as public, please.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ambassador Hill, in the summer of '98, did Mr. Rugova identify members of the Kosovo-Albanian negotiating team?
I don't recall. At a certain point, he did, and he was never holding back in terms of naming people from his group. He was not enthused about naming anyone who was outside the LDK.
Yes, let me just, Mr. President, may I refresh the witness's recollection?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Ambassador Hill, at paragraph 23 of the summary of your evidence, 23, it reads as follows: therefore, Hill contacted Rugova, who agreed to designate LDK members for the negotiating team, which he did in mid-August '98. Is that refresh your recollection?
Yes, there was no problem having Rugova naming LDK members.
Okay, thank you. Do you recall whether the KLA ultimately made an announcement as to who could negotiate on behalf of the KLA? And I can refresh your recollection if you...
Please do, because I do recall that the KLA was upset at my frustration after that meeting in Likov, and they did make some statement, but I cannot remember what it was.
Okay. Madam Court Officer, could we please have on the screen Exhibit 1D50, please? If we could just have the English version. Ambassador, this is a political declaration purporting to be issued by the General Staff of the KLA, titled Political Declaration Number 7 and dated 13 August 1998. So right around the time you say that Mr. Rugova designated LDK members. And if you look at the third paragraph from the top, it says, the General Staff makes it known to the public that Jakub Krasniqi, Javed Haliti, Bartol Mahmuti, Hashim Thaçi, Fatan Mehmeti, and Sokol Bashota are the political representatives of the KLA. The public announcement of the KLA's political representatives facilitates the coordination of political activity at the national level. And then the last paragraph says, for the purposes of expediting the process of creating the institutions of Kosovo, the General Staff of the Kosovo Liberation Army gives complete trust to Adam Demaci to take a leading role in this process. Not being under any party umbrella, the Kosovo Liberation Army asks Adam Demaci to withdraw from party activism. Now, do you have any recollection of this declaration?
Not being under any party umbrella. I don't recall. Adam Demaci was frequently trying to speak for the KLA. And I think this is an effort to clarify his role with the KLA. But I remember this well, in the sense that the KLA knew that we were very disappointed with their inability to name negotiators. And this was an effort to show that they are doing so. But I thought this was more as a public relations effort by someone.
It's time for the break.
Yes, if I could just have one last
Sure,
question on this
sure,
topic.
go ahead.
Ambassador Hill, this declaration is about 3 weeks before your statement that we just saw that you made at the Woodrow Wilson Center on the 4th of September. Given that context, can you tell us, based on your last answer, how credible you found this statement that these people could speak on behalf of the KLA?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness said he doesn't recall the statement.
Sustained.
Okay, well, at this point, given that these names have been, did any of these names that are in this document to you by the 4th of September, did you recognize them by the 4th of September as people who spoke on behalf of the KLA?
I recognize some of these names. I did not recognize that they spoke for the KLA, and the fact that it wasn't until 1999 that we had representatives suggests that this did not move forward.
Thank you. It's time for the break.
Ambassador Hill will give you a 15-minute comfort break. We'll be back here in 15 minutes, and then we'll go on until 5 o'clock, as previously agreed.
Okay.
Thank you. You may leave. Yes, follow her. Pardon?
Am I the only one taking?
No, we were letting you leave the courtroom first. All right, we're adjourned for 15 minutes.
All rise. All rise.
Be seated, please. Please bring the witness in.
Mr. President, we left off talking about political declaration number 7, and I would just like leave to see if I can refresh the witness's recollection by referring him to paragraph 23 of his summary of evidence,
Whose summary?
the witness's summary.
Okay. All right, we're ready to proceed again. We're still with Mr. Misitich.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Court Officer, could we please have on the screen DHT 12160 to DHT 12169 at page DHT 12163, please? Ambassador Hill, you'll recall before the break we were discussing this political declaration number 7, which purported to announce who the political representatives of the KLA were. Do you recall that discussion?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to show you the summary of your interview with the defense, and if we could scroll down to paragraph 23 and see if this refreshes your recollection. It says, thereafter, Hill contacted Rugova, who agreed to designate LDK members for the negotiating team, which he did in mid-August '98. This ultimately led the KLA to make an announcement a few hours later that Adam Damachi and some others could act on behalf of the KLA. Hill felt to some extent that these people were appointing themselves as KLA representatives, and he did not have any confidence in Damachi's truthfulness. Is that consistent with your recollection?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Ambassador Hill, did you form any conclusions in your discussions or contacts with the KLA from '98 and into '99 about what the KLA's objectives were?
Well, I didn't really know them at all, so it was hard to assess what their objectives were. It was very difficult to have meaningful meetings with anybody, but certainly of the people we talked to, there was a view that you could not negotiate with the Serbs, and that therefore what they wanted to do was achieve a independence, and that we would help them get there.
Did you form an impression, or actually let me ask you a different question based on your last answer. Did you form an impression as to whether the KLA had any long-term goals vis-a-vis engaging the United States?
They were interested in working with the U.S. because they felt that the U.S. Was in a position to realize their objectives, which was near-term independence for Kosovo.
Did you form any impressions as to whether the KLA had a goal to seize power in Kosovo for itself?
Well, I certainly gained the impression they were not interested in working with the LDK, and they did what they could to undermine the LDK's reputation. They rather than have Rugova being the voice of Kosovo Albanians, they wanted to be the voice, but it's hard to be a voice when no one knows who you are. So I think it was to displace Rugova, and that they would speak for Kosovo, and independent Kosovo.
Did you ever hear that the KLA's ultimate goal was for the KLA itself to run Kosovo?
That kind of fidelity, I didn't hear that kind of specificity to it. It was more a generalized thought that they didn't want to go back to autonomy or even negotiate any autonomy. They wanted independence, and they thought they were the ones to achieve it, and they could work with the Americans.
Turning now to your goals, did you believe you could put together a proposal that would offer Kosovo Albanians independence?
No. And the reason for that is I had talked to the Serb side, and it was pretty clear they had no interest in working on a document that led to independence. So trying to take two divergent points of view, I thought the best way was to regain autonomy for Kosovo, even though the autonomy we had in mind was much broader than that that was described in the 1974 Yugoslav Constitution. So I hope we could get autonomy. And then we had hoped that in this context, the EU could do more on the membership track for countries in the Balkans such that these issues of sovereignty sovereignty and whether it's autonomy or sovereignty, these issues would be more theoretical issues and that everyone would eventually be in the European Union, so that the pathway to the European Union would mean that we didn't have to go to these problems that were insolvable, that is, whether Kosovo could be independent or not. So ultimately, I try to describe to people that government is a set of services, and if you can have those set of services provided by yourselves, not by a foreign entity, that is, if you could have complete autonomy, and if you're part of a broader structure such as the European Union, you should not be so focused on what I used to talk to them as 19th century sovereignty issues.
Okay. What was your understanding as to the position of Mr. Rugova and the LDK? Were they for autonomy or independence?
They were for independence completely, but they were prepared to work with us on stages, and they understood that there was another side, that is, you had to make Serbia agree to something, and they knew that Serbia wasn't going to agree to independence for Kosovo. So it was really a question, this comes up in negotiation, who can kind of be a little more reasonable versus who can just restate their position. And I think the Rugova people had the same outcome as the KLA, but they were they were more reasonable in terms of how to achieve it.
Did you encounter any criticism for pursuing an autonomy plan rather than independence, whether within Kosovo or outside of Kosovo?
I did encounter a lot of that because I think there was this view in Kosovo that the U.S. was in favor of immediate independence for Kosovo, and this implicit assumption that we were more interested in a future relationship with Kosovo than we were in our relations with our Western European allies, and that therefore we would be more inclined to take the Kosovo independence course rather than a course that worked with our allies and worked on peace and security in the region. So people in Kosovo, and you got this in the press and various places, were disappointed in my, I would call it pragmatism, but they would call it somehow that I was excessively solicitous of this view that autonomy was the goal rather than immediate independence. So there was a sense of disappointment with me coming from some quarters. But people who understood that this is a complex problem and it's not given to sort of binary yes, no solutions, understood I was trying my best.
Thank you. What is your recollection as to the first time you met with Hashim Thaçi?
My recollection was it took place in this house, and if you could refresh my memory on the name of it.
If I were to suggest the place was Dragoville, would that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you recall who else was present at this meeting in Dragoville?
I think I recall that Krasniqi was there, and there was one other person. There were three people there.
Let me try to, if Mr. President, may I refresh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me
Let me let me show you the book interview with Mr. Shala.
Yeah.
And Madam Court Officer, could we please have DHT 12206 to DHT 12372, please, at DHT 12287. If we could scroll to the bottom of the page, please. And Mr. Shala, sorry, if we could, yes, that's it. In that, the fourth question, so it says, Shala, in that period, as far as I remember, you had the first meeting with Hashim Thaçi in Dragoville, giving him this proposal of an interim accord. So what was your impression of him at that first meeting? What was the whole meeting about? Your answer, I remember they all filed in. Mr. Shala says, this was the first meeting with him. Your answer, I think it was the first meeting with him. If we go to the next page, please. Officially, of course, you don't have any unofficial. Your answer, I don't think I'd seen him before that. He was wearing fatigues. He was accompanied by several others, including Jakub Krasniqi. One other, Mr. Shala then interrupts, Sokol Bashota, I think, was there. You say, what was the name of the guy? Shala says, Rambuya, who was also with Thaçi and Rambouillet. You say, no, other guy, who was a big hero. Anyway, I remember one guy wanted to bring his gun in, some big fighter type, not from Rambouillet. So the first thing I did was, I said, no guns, leave your guns outside, along with your boots. We sat down on the floor and began to discuss what we had in mind. A lot of the energy of the KLA in that meeting was devoted to telling us what a terrible guy Rugova was. And my point to them was, I don't care what you think of Rugova. Someday, if you have a democracy, you can have the pleasure of voting against him. And that's how you'll take care of Rugova, with democratic means. And speaking of democratic means, that is exactly what our draft is trying to do. So I kept trying to focus them on the draft. They kept trying to tell what a terrible guy Rugova was, and also how they needed to get, essentially, an independent state. Mr. Shala says, so this was a discussion with them? Your answer, yes, it was not all productive. Mr. Shala then says, did they say they would deliver their remarks? You say, they said they would deliver their remarks. I could tell there weren't too many lawyers among them. I think they appreciated being brought into the process. Ambassador Hill, does that refresh your recollection of the content of your meeting with Mr. Thaçi and others in Dragoville in November of '98?
Yes, it does. I think it's important to understand that, as we discussed sometime earlier, there was a perception that somehow I was too close to the Rugova faction, if you will. Now, you recall Rugova was the symbol of Kosovo for the previous 10 years. And I think there was this view that I needed to broaden my horizons, and they wanted to make sure I knew that Rugova is not appreciated in their circles as he is in my circles. I was trying to disabuse them of any notion that I played favorites among various factions. I was trying to make clear with that remark, if you don't like Mr. Rugova, you can vote him out, and try to get them focused on the draft, rather than getting involved in who likes whom in Kosovo politics. So yes, I recall this meeting. Not to be trivial about it, I don't remember, why would I say we sat on the floor? Because we actually sat on some benches. I remember that. But I do remember them coming in with guns, and I just said I don't really want to negotiate with people sitting next to their guns, so we tried to get guns in muddy shoes on the outside of the house.
Okay.
If I could just add that there was not enough of an understanding that I was representing the U.S. government and trying to move forward in a political arrangement. And there's this assumption that Americans were more emotionally involved in these issues than we were or should have been. So that is why I said, look, I don't want to discuss your views of Rugova. If you know, you can vote them out when you have free elections. So I really tried to keep people focused on a draft.
Did you get the impression that Mr. Thaçi spoke on behalf of anyone in this meeting?
No, because I don't think he said he did. And I was getting to the point where to ask someone that, I just didn't have any confidence I'd get an honest opinion, so I'd rather just talk about what people thought of the draft and draw my own conclusions.
Okay. Did you get the impression that Mr. Thaçi was a military commander?
No.
What impression did you get?
He spoke softly, thoughtfully, and I had the impression I was dealing with someone from more of a university environment than a military environment. I did not tell him that because I don't think that would have worked very well for him and his colleagues, but it was, to me, it was, he did not remind me of a military person.
Did you get the impression that Mr. Thaçi was someone who was in control of the KLA?
I had no basis for that. I think he was, of the three people I recall walking in, I think he was the leader of those three people. I did not get the sense of someone in control of a big organization.
Thank you.
There was just no basis for it.
Okay. To the best of your recollection, was there any discussion in this meeting about people who were allegedly detained or kidnapped by the KLA?
I think if you went through the various activities of the KLA, you would talk about killings and kidnappings. I do not recall kidnappings as a focal point on the issue of rules of war, et cetera. I do recall there were issues involving employees of an electrical plant north of Pristina and the question of what happened to them because family members were concerned. And of course, later on, I want to say December, there was the issue of the 8 Serbian soldiers. But no, I do not recall specifically dealing with a kidnapping issue that needed to be addressed.
Okay. Do you recall any discussion of detained people in this meeting?
Not in that meeting, although the issue of detained people was discussed generally, but I do not recall it being a particular focus of the meeting.
Well, does that mean it wasn't discussed?
I do not recall it being discussed at this meeting. I was focused entirely on seeing what they felt about our Kosovo plan.
Okay. Did anyone ever tell you at any time in 1998 or prior to June 1999 that Mr. Thaçi might have been involved in torture or other human rights abuses?
No, nobody ever addressed that with me.
Okay. This meeting on the 6th of November, do you recall whether Sean Burns attended that meeting?
I don't recall. I recall Tina Cadenow was there. It would have been logical for Sean to be there. I just don't recall that he was there. This was 25 years ago.
Okay.
Oh, if I could amend my previous answer, did I hear anyone say anything about Thaçi? The only person I ever heard on that subject, but it was more in a general comment, was from Milosevic.
Yes, we'll get to that in a
Okay.
second. But based on that answer, then, is it correct to say that Sean Burns never suggested to you that Mr. Thaçi was involved in human rights abuses?
No. I do not recall Sean Burns ever suggesting that.
Thank you. Turning to this issue of Mr. Milosevic, if we could please, in this book that's on the screen, turn to page DHT 12272, please. And if we could scroll down a bit.
Interpreters kindly ask the speaker to read slowly when quoting. Thank you.
And if we could, yes, if we could scroll down all the way, please. That's it. It says, the discussion is about Mr. Milosevic, just to give you the context. So the he, in the question, how much was he informed, refers to Mr. Milosevic. How much was he informed about the relations within Albanians? You once mentioned that he was thinking that Bukoshi has his own army, Rugova his own army, and the Kale its own army. Did he have any real information, or was he just guessing? And your answer is, I think he did a lot of guessing. I think he occasionally would get some report, which may or may not be credible. He would draw excessively on, I think means excessively, on one data point, on one report. And he would have his own sort of imagination. I remember he was utterly convinced that Hashim Thaçi was a very fierce warrior who had personally tortured people and had been involved in many killings. I don't know whether this is a compliment to Thaçi or not. He's not that sort of person. Is that excerpt consistent with your understanding of Mr. Thaçi, first of all?
No, it is not. With respect to Milosevic saying this, although I do not recall fierce warrior coming out of his mouth, I just don't recall that term. But I think I would summarize some of Milosevic's comments or analysis of the Kosovo Albanians as aimed at influencing us rather than informing us.
Thank you.
Mr. Misetic,
I'm going to clarify, but yeah.
if you are to move on from this, would you be able to ask the witness to put a date or an approximate date on the meeting where that exchange between himself and President Milosevic took place?
Yes, could we scroll to the previous page, please? So, Ambassador Hill, I'm going to let you, you've heard the question from Judge Matro. Could you take a look at the document on your screen and see from the context of when it is that you think you may have had this conversation with Mr. Milosevic?
I believe this would have taken place in fall '98, with Milosevic having a growing concern that we were moving away from a Rugova-only interaction to one that would involve KLA. And I think this was an effort by Milosevic to tell us not to work with the KLA. And so I think as we got on into the fall and we knew and we started meeting more personages from the KLA structures, I think he was worried that that we were going to give them too prominent a role in an eventual negotiation. So I don't have the answer to the judge's question about when this was, but I would think it would have been October, November, in that time frame.
Thank you.
Now,
And I might add that this line that Milosevic had, which was they have thousands of negotiators, was his view that Albanians can never come together on anything. It was more of an ethnic slur than an assessment of data.
okay. So let me break it down then. What was your assessment of his assertion that Hashim Thaçi was a very fierce warrior, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I knew that he had never met Hashim Thaçi, or I was pretty sure he had never met Hashim Thaçi, so I kind of preferred to go on my own judgment.
Which was what?
That he was not a fierce warrior, he was not a warrior, he was a political personage who drew on a background that was more historical and political science than military science.
And as for the assertion that Milosevic's assertion that he had personally tortured people and had been involved in many killings, you go on here in this excerpt to say, I don't know whether this is a compliment to Thaçi or not. He's not that sort of person.
Yeah, not only did I assess that he's not that kind of person, but I did not hear that from anybody. And I think it's important to understand that throughout this, I was in touch with Rugova, and he had plenty of opportunities to denounce people by name, and he did not do that.
Thank you. Mr. President, I would like to tender the excerpts from the book that I've shown him and ask that it be added to 1D423, and that is the excerpt at page DHT 12287 to DHT 12288, as well as the excerpt at DHT 12272 to DHT 12273. Yes. The first one is, the page is at DHT 12287 to 88. I can't hear.
I have the first one as DHT 12160 to 12169 at 12163.
No, that's the summary of his, that's the summary of his,
So you're not offering that.
no.
So the next one is 12206. To 12372.
Yeah, that's the full range of the book.
Yeah.
And now I just need
And
the
at
excerpt.
page DHT 12272.
And to 73.
It's 73?
12272 to 73.
273, okay. All right.
And then there's another excerpt. There's two separate excerpts, right?
What's the other one?
I showed it to him earlier. It's DHT 12287 to 88. That was the portion about his meeting with Mr. Thaçi in Dragoville.
Just say it again.
Yes. The pages I'm looking to tender are pages DHT 12287 to DHT 12288.
Just a second. Okay,
And the second excerpt is DHT 12272 to DHT 12273.
those two.
Yes.
DHT 12272 to 73 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Those 2 pages will be added to the exhibit number 1D00423.
The second one is 12387 to 12288. Both of them are admitted.
Those 2 pages will also be added to the exhibit number 1D00423. They're all classified as public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify if the correct pages were admitted? In the second one, I heard the judge say 12387, but I heard counsel refer to 1228728. And also, for the record, we don't object on either range.
Yes, it's 12287. Yeah. Okay. Ambassador Hill, let's turn to the Rambouillet Conference. What was your role and mandate at the Rambouillet Conference?
I was trying to get both delegations, the Serbian delegation and the Kosovo delegation, to agree on a text. That, even from the start, looked like mission impossible.
Why did it look like mission impossible?
First of all, I was not in favor of bringing them together at a conference in Rambouillet. I knew that Dayton, which people often tried to model Rambouillet on, that it worked at Dayton, therefore it could work at Rambouillet. The circumstances and the timing was completely different. So I was not informed by the success, relative success at Dayton, to think that we would get success at Rambouillet. Secondly, the document had become closer and closer to independence. First of all, the use of the term interim, which was introduced a week or two before Rambouillet, had really, I think, to the extent the Serbs were going to engage on this document, that word interim had become very serious obstacle for them. Secondly, colleagues in Washington had added that at a certain time we would have a referendum on Kosovo's eventual disposition. And I knew that and I knew this from Dayton, but I knew this from talking to Serbs, that this simply was not going to lead us anywhere.
Thank you. Can you tell us who represented the Kosovo Albanian delegation?
Well, we had 3 groups. We had the LDK group under Ibrahim Rugova. He was rather passive. He was not outspoken or an active participant. He was rather passive, as we kind of expected. Then we had the KLA delegation, and they were active collectively, although I can't say any one of them stood out from the others. And then we had the independent intellectuals. That's a term you would not use in the United States, so I had a lot of people asking me, why in the world would you refer to someone as an intellectual in a conference like this? But that's a side note on American culture, I guess. But among these independent intellectuals, you had people who ranged from people who really understood the give and take of it, like Blair Imshala, to Recep Çosia, who was there more as a sort of grand historian of Albania's right to Kosovo. So it was three groups to form one delegation, but it did not work very well.
Do you know who the head of the delegation was?
I think nominally it was Rugova, and then because he was older than the others, Recep Çosia, although and then on the KLA, Hashim Thaçi's name was the only one we were really aware of, but we never refer to people as being the heads of delegations because we felt it would just exacerbate problems.
Okay. What was the substance of the proposal at Rambouillet that the United States and other members of the contact group were proposing?
It involved establishing full autonomy for Kosovo, and ultimately the Rambouillet Accords included the idea of a referendum on its eventual disposition, and importantly, it laid out the idea that NATO would provide security for Kosovo, no longer any Serbian police or military units. It also, underlying principle was the idea to try to push things down to be as local as possible, because that was certainly our sense of how Kosovo is run, but it was also a way to protect the Serb communities, because there was an understanding that if this became a Kosovo state, that the Serb communities would want to leave.
Now, during the negotiations, did there come a time when the United States asked Mr. Thaçi to accept the proposal on the table?
Yes, and this was important because the view among the foreign ministers, and they attended Rambouillet from time to time, not always there, but the view was that if one side accepted the Rambouillet Accords and the other side did not, we would back the side that had accepted it and oppose the rejectionists. And so if both sides approved the Rambouillet Accords, we would have a deal. But no one was so sanguine, so optimistic that that would happen. And finally, if both rejected Rambouillet, the Accords, then we would be in a situation where we would apparently walk away from it. I was always skeptical of that kind of take it or leave it type proposition, but that certainly was the sense that if we can't get anyone to agree to this, why are we here?
Okay. And did Mr. Thaçi accept the proposal that you put before him?
He did not. He showed sympathy to what we were doing. He understood the argumentation of what we were doing, meaning that you can't just have a proposal that only works for one side. But his concern was that he could not be in a position to accept a proposal that did not put independence out there in clear terms.
Do you recall what he told you as to the reasons why he couldn't accept a proposal that didn't include independence?
Yes, I do recall that, and he said that on a couple of occasions, that if he went back to Kosovo having accepted a proposal that did not involve Kosovo independence, he would be killed. I did not follow up and say by whom or where or how. I just took it to mean that he was not in a position to say yes.
Thank you. Madam Court Officer, could we please have on the screen DHT 08787 to DHT 09214 at page DHT 08927, please?
Do?
You recognize the book?
I do. I do.
This is, of course, your book, Ambassador Hill. And if we look at that second paragraph, you write, first, can you tell us when the book was published? Do you recall?
2014.
Okay. If we,
Could I, and I don't mean this as a book advertisement, but I'd like to point out that the book had some of Rambouillet, a lot of Dayton, and a lot of North Korea, and a lot of Iraq. So it was a lot of different experiences I had in the Foreign Service.
yes, thank you. I'll just read out the second and third and fourth paragraphs on this page. It says, just before the recess, and this is now talking about the recess of the Rambouillet negotiations. Just before the recess that was set to be called 2 weeks into the process, Thaçi, to our great concern, left the conference on February 18, returning 2 days later with even tougher demands. He never said where he had gone, though the suspicion was that he went to see Adam Damaci, the firebrand self-appointed political leader of the KLA, who had refused to take part in Rambouillet. For months, Damaci had made outlandish and outlying pronouncements to the press in Pristina, so much so that the Serbs never interfered with him. Such was his contribution to their argument that the KLA was simply a group of crazed radicals. Why can't you agree to this? I asked Thaçi, truly not understanding whether he comprehended the near fatal consequences for the Kosovars of a no answer. It is you who doesn't understand, he replied. If I agree to this, I will go home and they will kill me. Does this excerpt from your book accurately reflect what Mr. Thaçi told you during the Rambouillet conference?
Yes, it does. One thing that, in reading the second paragraph, I did not mean to imply that he had gone to see Damaci. Damaci was the public face of this intransigence, but I never got the impression that Damaci, the self-styled leader, was really in a position to tell anyone anything. So I took it to mean it was more a collective view from people back in Kosovo that you can't accept this.
Thank you. Mr. President, I tender the cover page of the book and this page of the book. So DHT 08787 to DHT 09214 is the full range, and we tender page DHT 08787 and DHT 08927.
No.
DHT 08787 to DHT 09214 at DHT 08927 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe there were 2 pages. I believe there were 2 pages, the cover page and one more page.
Oh, yeah, plus the cover page, I'm sorry.
Those 2 pages will be assigned exhibit number 1D00425. Classification is public. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Hill, how did the Rambouillet conference conclude in February 1999?
it didn't appear to be heading toward any kind of success. That is, it looked like both sides had rejected the Rambouillet Accords. But on the last day, Vetin Soroy, who had the worldliness and intellectualism to understand that that rejecting this Rambouillet would be a last and best chance for the Kosovars, had addressed the Kosovo delegation and he came up with a very good proposal, which he then brought to the assembled foreign ministers, saying that the Kosovo Albanian delegation accept the proposal, but we need to go back and essentially make the case to our constituents. So this was taken as an acceptance, which represented the idea that we would back the Kosovo delegation. It was not signed, however, and what Soroy suggested, and it was accepted, was that 3 weeks later they would come back and sign it after checking with constituents. So that's how it ended. They came back. We had a signing ceremony in Paris where the three people representing the three groups signed. And at that point, that was the end of Rambouillet. We knew that this probably meant, because there started to be an uptick of violence on the ground coming from Serb units, we knew that this was probably going to lead to NATO action.
Thank you. Do you recall who the constituents back home might have been that needed to be consulted?
No, I did not, but I certainly had the impression that this was a retail business and they had to go to a lot of different constituents. There was no one person or group of leaders that they had to talk to, that they had to go out into the hinterland and try to sell this. So hence the 3 weeks that it would take. I did not have the impression that there was a chance that this would fail. I think Vetin Soroy understood that if people went back and explained where they were, it would be accepted. So I think that's basically what happened. They went back and talked to a lot of local area constituents, and I do not recall anyone saying, well, we went back and talked to Mr. X and Mr. X was okay with this. I don't recall any leadership. The idea was to find out whether there was going to be, whether the Kosovo would be up in arms about this or would be supportive.
Okay. Madam Court Officer, could we please have on the screen Exhibit P 1076? Ambassador, this is a cable. If we could scroll down a bit, please, for the date. Or scroll up.
Yeah.
Up. Yep, right there.
So,
Can you tell us what the date is?
I see the declassification date.
To the left above the
Yeah,
addressees.
the date time group was February 99.
Yes, I believe it should be 25 February.
25, yeah.
So right after the
Yeah.
break in the conference, correct?
Right.
Yes. And if we, so if we can scroll down a little bit, please. Point 1 says, at COM's instructions, late today, U.S. KDOM Chief Burns extended the invitation contained in Reftel through KLA spokesman Jakub Krasniqi to Krasniqi and fellow KLA general staff members Hashim Thaçi and Ram Buya. Krasniqi expressed appreciation for the invitation and said the KLA would be pleased to accept an invitation from the United States. He said he would consult immediately with his colleagues about timing, but volunteered that it would probably be preferable for the KLA delegation to go to Washington immediately prior to the reconvocation of the Rambouillet Conference because of the problems the KLA delegation now faced. Krasniqi pledged to go back to Burns ASAP. And if we can go to the next page, please, to paragraph 4. So there's a supposed invitation for the KLA to go to Washington. And paragraph 4 says, while we wait for the dust to clear, COM Miles, which I believe is Chief of Mission,
Yes.
Miles,
Yes.
Ambassador Hill, and KDOM Chief Burns also believe it is essential to include military commanders in the delegation. They are the ones who need to understand what the transition of the KLA into democratic institutions means. Pending the outcome of the KLA's current internal discussions, we recommend the following KLA commanders be considered for inclusion in the proposed delegation. New KLA Commander Suleiman Salimi, aka Sultan. Salimi formerly commanded the key Dranica zone in central Kosovo and is one of the KLA's founders. He is reportedly close to Hashim Thaçi. It goes on. If we can scroll down, please. Remy and Salimi are considered the KLA's most aggressive commanders. Remy is reportedly in line for greater responsibilities and is a fierce opponent of Rambouillet. Does this refresh your recollection at all about a need to, about a trip to Washington and a need to include certain commanders to get them on board?
Well, I think what's important to understand is that these are suggestions being made by Sean Burns as to who was a player and who needed to be convinced. Trips to Washington are often kind of thrown in as a sweetener in various deals. I mean, this comes up a lot in diplomacy, so this was not an unusual thing to do. I think it is fair to say that some of this suggests more structure than I would have suggested. I mean, these are individuals that fine if we want to convince them, and that a trip to Washington would be the way to convince them. But I'm not sure I'm comfortable with some of the descriptions of who they were and what they were doing. I also, if I were working in the White House, I might be a little hesitant about having these people meet the president if that's what they had in mind. So I notice they don't seem to address that issue. But I think this needs to be looked at as simply an idea to try to get Kosovo to yes. And this was an analysis of who the naysayers are and how we can move the naysayers over to yes.
Okay. I'd like to show you a different document. And if we could, Madam Court Officer, if we could please have on the screen DHT 05401 to DHT 05405. And Ambassador, this is an OSCE report from the 25th of February, 1999. So it's about 2 days after the conclusion of the Rambouillet talks. And if we could please go to page 3 of this document, so DHT 05403, the developments in the mission area, and the second paragraph under number 2 says the office of Adam Damaci a KLA political representative, declared null and void an agreement reached by the Kosovo Albanian delegates in Rambouillet to form a provisional government led by a member of the KLA. The KLA news agency Kosova Press reported that the delegation members decided on 23 February that the government would administer the province until elections could be held. The deal was struck between the KLA, the Democratic League of Kosovo LDK, and the United Democratic Movement LBD. All three organizations will have equal representation in the government, and the KLA, by mutual agreement, will nominate a prime minister. However, Adem Demaci's office said in a statement that such a government would lack legitimacy and constitute a, quote, faint attempt by the people from the unsuccessful negotiations at Rambouillet to cover up their failure, close quote. Demaci's office said the decision to form a provisional government is completely at variance with the principles set forth by the KLA headquarters. The Kosovo Albanian newspaper Kohaditore reports Demaci's office as saying that, quote, this act also provokes and manipulates the Kosovar opinion into accepting an unfavorable agreement for the people of Kosovo, close quote. Now, you've not seen this before, correct?
No.
Is Adem Demaci's behavior as described in this report consistent with Adem Demaci's behavior as you understood it during the Rambouillet Accords?
Yes.
Okay.
And every other time we ever talked to him.
Were you familiar at the time that the KLA, the LDK, and the LBD on the last day of the conference had agreed to form a provisional government?
Yes, I was, but to be frank, this was a long-standing issue they had about displacing the LDK, and I kept telling them that this is their internal issues, that what we need to have is agreement on the Rambouillet Accords.
Mr. Demaci here is quoted as saying that this act, meaning the formation of a provisional government, manipulates Kosovar opinion into accepting an unfavorable agreement for the people of Kosovo. Did you have any understanding at the time of whether the formation of the provisional government would have any effect on any remaining hardliners in Kosovo?
I, having been having seen these issues happen before, forming provisional governments, in my experience there, had led to more problems than they solved. So I was not encouraging of this process. And I think the fact that Demaci thought this was an opportunity to once again denounce everybody who was trying to get something done really, to me, was indicative of the fact that this was not the way to solve their problems. They needed eventual elections.
Thank you. Mr. President, I tender the document DHT 05401 to DHT 05405.
Any objection?
No.
DHT 05401 to DHT 05405 is admitted. Please assign the number.
Thank you, Your Honor. The document will receive exhibit number 1D00426 and classification is confidential.
It can be public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Hill, did you have an opportunity to go to Kosovo after the Rambouillet agreement? But before the Paris signing?
Yes, I did. And the purpose of that was to get some sense of, or I should say, the purpose of that was to confirm our sense that the answer would be positive.
And did you meet with anyone from the KLA on that trip?
Yes, but I do not recall precisely who. I just know it did not include Hashim Thaçi.
If we could please have Exhibit 1D310 on the screen, please. This is a report of the Congressional Research Service offering a chronology of the Kosovo conflict from September of '98 to March of '99. And if we could please go to page DHT 02874, please. We could scroll down to March 8th. The entry there says, on March 8th, 1999, after a long meeting with U.S. Envoy Christopher Hill in Pristina, the KLA agreed to accept the Rambouillet peace agreement. Does the date seem accurate to you? The date of March 8, 1999 is the date of that meeting.
More or less, but what I'm focused on is whether the KLA agreed to Rambouillet. I think it was favorable, but I think this is a bit of an exaggeration.
I'm just interested in the date for now.
I'm sorry, I'd need to look at a, yeah, looks about right. I'll say that.
Thank you.